classes. So these classes actually these are not showing on your screens. Maybe to give it some time. Okay, these classes are a way of organizing the code. Actually, this is one very style of programming, if I may use the style. Actually, it is called a paradigm, a way of programming, a different way of programming. Up to now, we were just programming by declaring variables and then using them, putting some values. Now what we're going to be doing, we're going to construct some different programs and components of a program. And the components that we're going to see are called classes and object, and I'm going to explain the differences of all these, inshallah. So today is just an introduction. We're going to just look for these three first parts. Just introduction to object-oriented programming. OOP stands for object-oriented programming. This is a very important way to program, which allows you to use whatever you did before to your other programs. And this is something that allows programmers not to always reinvent the wheel, to use some things. And by the way, we were using them. For example, the example that we were doing, we were using, for example, the class scanner. And that class scanner, actually, we were instantiating an object from the class. And what does this instantiate an object from a class? Actually, I was declaring a variable of that class that we used to call KB. And then we used KB equal new and then scanner. Remember when we used that syntax? Actually, we're going to learn more about how this syntax work internally. But we're going to start this step by step. So the first step is just to get to understand the concept of a class. So the thing is that any object, anything that if you think about it, it has like two special features, some characteristics and some actions that we can do. Let's take, for example, a car. So in this case, the characteristic can be a brand name. Well, this is a telephone, but it can apply to a car as well. The brand name, the manufacturing year, color, and for the case of the phone, these are the actions that you can do with a phone. You can store a contact and you can dial a number. So there are some actions that you can do, and there are some characteristics or some information about the concept of a telephone. So this is the idea behind this object-oriented programming. Actually, any object, it has some characteristics and actions. So the actions are going to be for us some instructions, some statements that we're going to be doing. And characteristics, these can be some variables that we're going to store the information inside of it. So this is the object-oriented programming. We refer to it as OOP. So in this object-oriented programming, all our programs are objects and classes that are interacting with each other by using the actions. Well, we get into more details about that, inshallah, in a couple of minutes. So the actions actually are called, and you have to memorize that, the actions are called methods. And the characteristics are called instance variables. I'm going to talk about it. And the objects types are called classes. So the types of those objects are called classes. And for example, this is a class student, and we have the name, ID, and GPA. These are methods. Are these actions? Name, ID? It's more some sort of a characteristic of a student. A student has a name, has an ID, and has a GPA. Let's say like a cumulative GPA. So, but this is the class, let's say, the class student, and this is the object student, which is an instance of the class, an example of that class. So Ali with this ID, with this GPA, is an example of an instance of student. We can have more, of course, with different information, but do the same thing. We have the same three characteristics: the name, ID, and GPA. They can be all different, but still they share those three characteristics. And these are different objects. So this is just to distinguish between the object and the class. Like the generic, the definition, and the object is like one example of that class. Actually, the term is one instance of that class. And let me maybe show you some examples of a class. And let's have a look at an example. So maybe this is the general form of a class. We used to not change that. Whenever we created a program, we just go straight to the static main, void main, where we type the code. But anytime we created a project or created a file, we have a name of a class over there. So we were always using the class, but we said we're going to defer talking about that until later on. Now is the time where we're going to be understanding these classes more than before. So a class has a name. Of course, the name is an identifier that needs to respect the same rules that any variable needs to respect. And we have those different variables, and these are the methods. So variables are like the characteristics, and we call them instance variables. And these are actions that we call instance methods. Sometimes you might see also these are not called variables, but might be called properties or fields. These have the same meaning, just the name is different. So you have variables, and then you have methods. Methods are a group of code that does something. Like, for example, public static void main, it groups some statements, some instructions that will do something. We can have more than one block by having more than one method, and this is the idea behind that. We're going to be talking more about this detail about the methods, because the methods actually, this is what is new to you. Declaring variables, there's nothing new for you there. Classes, the only thing that you need to know is that you have to give them names. But let's get into more details about those instance methods. And okay, all of those we call them member items. Maybe let's have an example first. This will maybe give you a better example of a method, and this is one method over here, and there are three instance variables. So of course we can understand that the name is a text, ID is an int, double is a GPA is a double. But what about this thing over here? It's like a group of instructions, group of statements that we group together, and we give it a name. And whenever we want to execute what's inside of it, we just need to call that name. So in this case, it is just displaying name and the content of this variable over here, and then ID with the content of that one over there. And each method actually, when it is defined, it has like two parts: the heading and the body. This is the heading, like the head of the method, and whatever is come from this brace until this closing brace, this is the body. So this is the body of the method. The body of the method is a group of statements. Very easy to get. But what about this over here, this the header of the method? Because there's different parts. This thing and the name, and also if you have here the parentheses where I can put something in between those two parentheses, and this has a meaning, and we're going to have a look at that later on, inshallah. So anyway, a method is an action, so it groups some statements, and before using that I need to specify in the heading, well, we are going to talk about this public later on, so we defer it. We're always going to use public for now, and we're going to check that and see what are the different alternatives that we can use. The type return, this is the return data type, which means what this method is returning. We're going to see more examples of that, but we need to specify a data type or void. There are two types of methods. Very important for you to distinguish between them. It's very easy to recognize each one of them. When you have this method with void, that means this method does not return anything. Void is like a special data type that says there's no return data type. And the data type, the type return here, it can be like any data type that we know: int, double, float, short, byte, boolean, string, or scanner. I can return any class data type like scanner, string, or any primitive data type like int, double, float, etc. So this is the thing about this type returned. It can be any data type, either it's a primitive data type or a class data type. And there's some versions of some methods that do not return anything, and if I have to write a method that do not return anything, I just need to mention void. Very okay, that's clear. The method name is any valid, and we say valid because it needs to respect the three rules. Remember those three rules? What is a valid Java identifier? Doesn't start with a number.
Consists of letters.
Okay, numbers, letters, and underscore, and do not include keywords. Exactly, Java keywords like int. For example, I cannot name anything as an int. I cannot name a variable as an int. I cannot name a method as an int because int is a reserved keyword. Very good. So these are the three conditions. And the param list, this param list over here, it's a list of parameters. What is a list of parameters? Actually, we're going to be talking about it later, but just to give you an idea, this is a list of variables. Like I can put some int a. This is one list of parameter. We can have only one parameter, or maybe more, or zero. Like in the example that we've seen before, the output, this one, it has nothing. It doesn't have. Okay, where is it? Okay, it doesn't have anything in between the parentheses. That means it doesn't have any parameter. It doesn't need any parameter. While here, I might have one, or two, or three, or more, depending on the programmer's need. So something like this. So I can have data type, name, comma, data type, name, comma, and so on, as much as I need. We're going to talk about that later on as well, but just know that there is some list of parameters that I can put between the parentheses in the method, after the method name. And list of parameters, and this is going to be used as an input. So let's have a look at this. Once I have created the class student, how can I use it? I can use the student like this. I can use this as a way to declare an object of student. You remember when we were seeing, let me go back a little bit, when we're seeing like this stu object 1 is an object of type student. So this is, imagine that now if this would be s, how can I declare this s? Instead of stu object 1, I name it s, just to be able to link to whatever we are going to see now, like here. So this is how I can declare that object. Data type, variable name equal new, and then the name of the class. And I close the parentheses. And this reminds you of the scanner, because this is, I think, the only one where we used extensively this new and then the name of the class. Scanner, whatever, equal new, scanner, and system in. This is what we've been using since the beginning. So now we're going to, if we need to declare an object of a class, I need to use this type of syntax. Any questions? How can I do? We know that student, we said that student has like a name, and we have like ID and GPA. So how can I put some values in those variables? Well, this is easy by using this syntax over here. So s.name equal Ali means take this string Ali and put it inside the name, the variable name, inside of the object s. And what is the data type of that object s? Well, we know that this is a student. And s.id equal, I can put something, s.gpa, same thing. And what about this one over here? This is not the variable, but the method. Now I'm calling this method. When I'm calling this method, what would happen? It is going to go inside here and execute these lines, and then go back to the line, because this has a print line, and that's it. So in this example over here, you have a class. Do you realize that you have like two classes in this one? You have a class student and a class test. In the class student, you just declared the instance variables, and then the one method that is going to display something, and this name, the name is, this is the name, and the ID, this is the ID, and so on. And in this test, did you realize there's no main here, but there's a static void main here? Why? Because this is the main starting point of the program. If I have many classes, in my program, which one is going to start? Actually, it is always going to start from the main. So whatever has the main, we're going to start from here. So now if I'm going in the main, I can see that the first instruction that it says student s1 equal new student, so it is going to prepare a variable of data type student. And then I can I'm doing the same thing with s2, another student, and s1.name, I'm putting the name of s1, the ID of s1, and the GPA of s1, and the same thing for the s2, put in those. And look, I'm doing s1.output details. This means it's going to output the details of the student 1, and this is going to output the details of the student 2. Let me show you on NetBeans how maybe this is going to show up. And let me create a new project. Okay, next. Let me save it in 101. And I'm going to name it, I don't know, week 11, CS101, lecture 1. Or maybe not. Just in order for me to use the same thing, let me show you something. I'm going to use this because this is called test. I just would like to show you exactly the same thing. So this test, I'm going to use it as well. So I'm going to name this test, okay? Even if it's not the best way to do that. But anyway, we can change that later on. So let's say, imagine that I'm using test. So that's for easily starting having the same thing. I'm going to close these. So I just would like to show you this one because I'd like you to, because we're going to be doing something new for the first time, creating another class. So this is the test class, okay? So this test class, it has just this text over here. It says like student. I'm going to type student s1 equal new student. Then of course it's going to tell me what is student. There is no such thing as a student, so I need to create a class of students. So how can I do that? Maybe the easiest way is to right click, new Java class, and I'm going to give it the name of that class. It is named student, and then finish. Now you can see I have two classes in this project, one with student and the other one with test. Now if you go back here, you see it's not complaining anymore because there is a class called student, and it is going to recognize that it exists. Well, since we're here, let's just enter those things over here. So we have a string name, we have int ID, and we have double GPA. That's not double. And then we have public void output details, if I remember correctly. And it says, output details, that's the one. O lowercase, D capital letter. So I'm following the same thing. I just forgot to enable this one so you can see what is happening. So in here, I'm just going to type this name and ID, and then this, and go back to the line. Basically, okay, let's just use the name plus name plus ID plus ID, and you notice that this ID is highlighted, since it means that this one is that one over there, and it's not print line because print line is on the second line. It just doesn't matter, and they just want it to be this way, so we use it the same way. And GPA equals GPA. So now we have this over here. The class student is done, and then we have another class test. In that overclass test, we are going to use this student S1. Copy and paste, and name it S2. And I'm going to put the values into S1.name. Do you notice that when I press the dots, it just displays some choices that I can use, and you see that these are the ones that are bold. That means it belongs to the class that I just created. There's some others that belong to I never wrote any of those methods, but still they are there, and we're going to talk about that later on when we talk about something, maybe introduction to inheritance. So these are methods. There's a list of methods that are available, and these are the list of variables that are available in that class. So I would just like to use name, and we said this is Ali. Just to use the same example, and ID, well, S1.ID equal, and whatever. I'm just going to to put any number, and S1 again dot GPA, and let's raise the GPA a bit. So this is about S1. We can do the same again about S2, or maybe copy and paste might be faster. Instead of S1, now it's going to be S2. So it says whatever, I'm going to whatever use, and now I have S1 dot output details, and copy the same. I cut. Okay, now copy and paste, and now I'm doing the output details of S1, which is going to display this information in that format, and S2 again the same thing. Let's run and see the result of that. So you see this is showing this one, and there's no space between these two because I forgot to add probably a space from here. So now that I added the space, if I just run it again, it is going to display a better manner. So that's just, let me summarize and then I'll take your question. This is how we declared a class that we used here. So this is very important to distinguish between the class declaration or definition and the class use. I use the class here by using the objects from that class, but here I just define the class with its variables and methods. Yes.
Output details, same work system output. Same exact.
The two, you mean the output details? Is it the same?
Same work with
Actually, exactly, it's the same. It's the same thing that is going to be displayed, except that the variables are going to be different, because here in the S1 I put Ali in name, while in S2 I put Sami in name. So in this S1.output details is going to run the same thing, but with this Ali, this name to be Ali, and the other one is going to run the same thing, but with the name to be Sami. The other one. Yeah. Yes. What if? If you have many students, you can have as many as you want. You can declare them to be, well, this is another topic, but let's say you can declare to be a list of students, a class of students equal, but class cannot be used. Student, let's student class new student. Remember, this is just an array, and I can put a class of 5 students. And then each one of them, you can put something like S1, for example. But here is 0 equal new. You have to do the new student for each one of them. So anyway, there's a better way. Of course, you can use a loop. But I'm just showing you that each one of these elements of that array, I need to initialize them and instantiate the object.